Hello and welcome to the Book by Book, a podcast about the odd book or two we've read. I'm your host Scott and I'm not alone. Toby's here too. This episode we're talking about Stephen King's Cujo, and it's going to be a pretty spoiler heavy episode. But if that's okay with you, continue on and I'll see you on the other side.
This hulking great, well, I say hulking, he was a big dog but small, you know, what they called like pit bull terriers, like a bit like a pit bull terrier but not a pit bull terrier. The other ones, I nearly had it then, that all the kids like, and the gang members and all those sorts of people have. We had one of those, but he had health and anger problems, so he didn't last too long, and he got adopted by another family. And then there was a dog before that as well, that was a lurcher. And then there was Dottie, who I loved, but is no longer in my life.
So you had loads of dogs. You had like 5 then in your time.
Yeah, I'm a big dog person. I've always wanted a Saint Bernard though.
I've never heard any of these stories apart from the one I was thinking of. The
whistle-stop tour of my life with dogs.
All of this is segueing beautifully into this week's episode.
Yes.
And that being Cujo by Stephen King.
Yes, indeed.
So, apparently, you're a Stephen King fan.
Oh yeah. I would say that there's definitely a strong case for that. I don't have Cujo in first edition though.
Oh, is that a valuable one?
It's up there because it's one of his earlier ones.
Oh, okay. So I just read this book. I've never read it before. I've never really had much of an inkling to.
Okay, that's interesting. Why is that?
I don't know. It's strange. Most of my friends have heard of Cujo. None of them have seen or know what it's about, apart from the one with the dog, which puts it in this strange world of everyone knowing it. Almost, I would say, almost like Frankenstein in a way. Like the novel Frankenstein. Like a lot of people know
that's a good point.
The gist of what it's about. But I don't know that many people who have actually read it or know the ins and outs.
Mm-hmm.
So you read it a long time ago, but you caught up recently.
Yeah, I read it. When did I read it? I read it probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, I guess.
Oh, okay. So as an adult.
Yeah, definitely. Because we came to it very late on. I think I got a copy. It was when I started collecting my first editions. I found it and I come across it, and it had the first edition cover and everything, although it wasn't a first edition. I think it was a second print. And then you said that you were reading it and we were going to do this episode. So last night I watched the late 70s film, just to sort of recap.
We could definitely talk about the film after. I've never seen it. I did watch the trailer. I was talking about it last night. It does look naff, but hold your thoughts. We can talk about it after. Toby's did an eye-bulging look there for our listeners who can't see. Yeah, I will quickly run us through the plot, I guess.
Yes, no, I chip in my thoughts while we go along.
So, as far as everyone knows, Cujo itself is Saint Bernard, approximately £200.
Yes.
Well, I would say this book is a lot more than that. And I'm getting into thoughts, but I'm supposed to be sticking to plot. So
carry on. This is our show, and we will roll with it how we want. Yeah.
So I'd say Cujo is about 2 families and a very small outer cast from those. The main family is the Trentons. They are Vic and Donna, and they have a 4-year-old son, Tad. But actually, I wanted to get onto the very beginning of this, the very first page. And this is the second time he's done this. I don't remember. I think it might have been Dolores Claiborne or The Dark Half. Okay. But this book opens up with a clanger, spoiler, for another one of his books, that being The Dead Zone.
Oh, yes. Yes, you mentioned this before, I think, briefly.
Yeah, do you remember what that was? That must have been The Dark Half.
Yeah, possibly.
This book opens with, I'm going to read the first line anyway. Not so long ago, a monster came to a small town of Castle Rock, Maine. He killed XXXX. His name was XXX, and he also killed blah, 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 blah. and then what happened to him was etc etc etc. That's like a big chunk of the dead zone,
Yes.
and he just opens spilling out
Yeah.
a half.
It came after the dead zone, obviously. So.
But with the dead zone, that's a big part of the dead zone.
Yeah.
This not being a sequel particularly, and at this point, were people reading purely because of King, like universe building? It seems a strange way to open it.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. Like, as if that's the only reference to.
It comes back a little bit. There are some police later on in this novel who will talk about the times that their memories of that case. I thought I'd seen the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life.
Yes.
But now I've seen some stuff here in Cujo land. So I think there's I feel like there could be two reasons why he did this. One is to sort of gently introduce that there's just a bit of magic in the air in this world. Because although it doesn't explicitly say it in this opening, the dead zone has some sort of supernatural element stuff. So if we're putting it in the same world, we can say, okay, well, that type of, not magic system, but if those events happened in this world, then if something spooky happens or premonitions happen, we kind of know to take them seriously.
Yes, okay. I can't for the life of me remember anything premonition-y happening as such.
Interesting, because I've got some thoughts.
Apart from maybe a little bit later on regarding the dad. So yeah, that does make it interesting in the sense that why would he establish a world in which magic is possible or the shine is a thing if he's not going to reference back to it or utilize it in this story? Because this story, for me, from what I can remember, and after watching the film, was the most unsupernatural story of them all. It's very up there it's devoid of any supernatural elements, pretty much.
Right, it's a straight man v nature story. But the other reason I would say was because afterwards we open with the 4-year-old son Tad, who's having a lot of nightmares.
Yes.
And so the other explanation for having this opening explaining who this killer was and people he killed is to say, like, this happened some years ago, a small town, how do murders affect a small town in the future, like how it becomes fiction and like becomes a boogeyman to the kids. And that's kind of another reason I would say, I guess, a bit of mix of those two.
Yep, I'd agree with that. Very valid.
And we can sort of, I guess that plays into some of the themes we can talk about later about fear and the fear of fear. So we open on Tad, a 4-year-old boy, and he's just screaming in his sleep, and his parents come in and there's monsters in the cupboard. And so this whole opening is this sort of ritual the parents have, opening the cupboard, emptying it, showing it to him. His dad has like a mantra, reads to the kid. That whole night, it's sort of about this. This opening, I wouldn't say chapter. This book has no chapters. It just keeps going. There's like just a line where we know I guess it's a chapter end, but it's just no clear chapters.
Yes, they're complete. It's just one story, really, isn't it? Just comes straight through.
You know, the parents talk about what it is to be a parent and how you should deal with your kid's fear. Like, are they mollycoddling him by giving him the mantra and by telling them, you know, by not just sort of being a bit stricter, I suppose.
I think this, what I liked about this opening was it was a very good setup. The father says there are no such things as monsters in the real world yet.
Right.
And that's repeated quite often in the early setup. I think there are no such thing as monsters. What did we say last night? There are no monsters in the real world. In the daytime, says the kid. I think it's rather nice as well, because I went through a very similar thing as myself as a kid. My dad used to come into my bedroom, and I used to go into his bedroom, say that I couldn't sleep and I was having nightmares, or was seeing things in the bedroom. He would come in and sit in my bedroom and talk to me and take me through his mantras, not as to the extent of what Tad's got in his story, but my dad did similar sort of things. He'd pretend that Superman, who was on my curtains, would fly around the room protecting me, and all of those sorts of things. Anything he could do to to coax me out of this relentless night by night. I'm having trouble sleeping. Just get out of the room and let us have sex. That sort of thing.
Right.
I can imagine what that must be like as a parent, looking back on it now. I even got to the point where at the very end of it, I walked into his room and I was like, guess what? He was like, oh, what now? I'm not having nightmares. I can go to sleep fine. And then left and went to sleep and never troubled him again.
Oh, happy child, Toby.
Yeah, unlike Taps.
Yeah, so Vic is basically a madman. And by that, I mean like the advertising style. He's like an advertising exec for like branding and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this because it actually has a lot to play with his character.
It does. It has a massive amount. I'd forgotten all about this when watching the film back, that how much of the book is devoted to this.
I guess they've recently, in the last few years, I suppose, have moved from New York to Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And you get the sense that Vic is kind of flying. He's loving it. He's very busy with work. You never really find out if he loves his job or not, but he's certainly dedicated to it.
Yeah, that's exactly. He commutes back and forth a lot, doesn't he? So it's away quite a bit.
He has to sort of fly to meet clients. He's certainly away a lot. And he just instinctively feels his marriage is a bit weak right now. Like he can't put his finger on it. And he kind of suspects Donna's having an affair, but he knows this could be paranoia.
Yeah.
Donna is having an affair. And I guess it's kind of interesting. I don't know many other Stephen Kings where the family are sort of gently breaking up.
Pet Cemetery.
Yeah, but they're strong as a family. There are events out of their control. This is like the fragility, I suppose, of relationships, right, and the weakness and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly want to talk about Pet Cemetery a little after this because of sort of not parallels, but certainly the way this family is written and the Pet Cemetery family is written. We also have, there is some type of fast food, and we sort of cut away to this random family who are eating a meal with young children. And it's sort of like, I don't know what this is. I guess, we just immediately introduced a new character. And suddenly there's a scream and the mum runs into the bathroom and there's just blood all over the toilet. And we're like, oh, what is this? And then we find out that one of the, I guess, restaurants or foods that Vic represents as an advertiser has sort of messed up with some of its food dye.
Yeah, it's a cereal.
A cereal, right, of course. So although it's completely harmless, it some sort of red food dye works in your system and it can give you a terrifying jolt if you're not prepared. This is kind of make or break for them if they lose this client.
If they lose it, then the basic, I'd say 90% of their income just evaporates.
Donna is called off the affair. This guy called Steve Kemp, who was like a tennis coach, a poet, a sort of, I don't know, a free spirit, I suppose. Well, certainly that's his allure to sort of women. Donna comes home alone one day and this guy is there on his own. And he's like, hey, baby, let's have some sex. She wants to call it off. And it sort of turns into quite a vicious argument and then a bit of a physical fight. And it gets pretty nasty. Like this guy suddenly sort of shows his colors, as it were. So he goes home to Stu and he writes an anonymous letter to the husband, Vic, just saying like something intimate, like a mole low down on her body.
And he's friends with with Vic as well in the film. They're like buddies. So it's not untoward that he's at the house, but the fact that Donna's on the floor mopping up milk and eggs that have just been spilt all over the floor, he's already come around to this idea that she's having, that the relationship's on the decline, that they should have another kid to try and fix it. Then he catches them. He comes home from work early one day and he catches them outside of this guy's house, sort of just not embracing, but kind of semi-embracing over the bonnet of her car. And as he drives past, he's like, was that my, turns around, goes back. And by the time he gets back, they've gone. And then he gets back to the house and obviously they've had this ruck and everything's confirmed. And he just looks at her and goes, yes or no? And she just looks and goes, yes. And then he turns around.
Okay. So I guess that sort of speeds up the pace. I mean, that closely matches in with what's happening in the book. I don't think Vic knows Steve that well. I certainly don't think they're buds.
No.
I think he's sort of hiding. The reason he is there, like you say, is to drop off something like a cabinet or something. And that's sort of the setup for this family. They're like a young family who are just going through a hard time in this new city. So across town we have the Chambers. That is Joe, Charity, and a 10-year-old son called Brett. And they have a Saint Bernard. Near the beginning, Donna of the previous family is having car issues, and they do swing into the mechanic just briefly. And they know there's a Saint Bernard. It sort of comes lurching out, and they're a bit terrified, but it just like licks the kid. It's like super friendly. And so the dad is the mechanic who owns this sort of stretch of land. I guess you sort of picture it like a farm with a huge shed. And Charity is sort of like a long-suffering wife. I don't think Joe comes off as like an alcoholic, but certainly abusive, certainly like the king of his castle.
He's a belt buckle lover.
And so the drama here is that Charity can feel her son becoming the dad. And so she sort of sets in motion a way to just get him away for a few weeks. But knowing Joe isn't the type that will just say, sure, go visit your sister for a few weeks.
He wins the lottery.
Yeah, she sort of buys some tools, as it were, like I'm not sure what it was, something that he would need.
A hydraulic lift.
Not gang rushes him, but like, you know, you can have this, but I'm taking our kid to see my sister for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. And initially he's like, no. And it's like for the first time in her life, she stands her ground.
Yeah.
And it's again like the situation in the kitchen with the other family where this could flip any second now. She just about gets her way. And I think one of the things about him is he can sort of like turn this flash smile and turn on this like care mode and loving mode. But she's been with him long enough to be wary. And this is sort of key to some of the events that are going to take place. Like the fact that this is a very small window and it's precariously balanced, like he could change his mind any moment now. And she sort of wants to get the kid away because she could just feel him becoming a dad and his influence becoming too strong in him. Yeah. So that the mum just wants to get him away and in some attempt to show him the bigger world and to sort of like give him a chance to culture his own opinions and personality, even though he's super young. And
it's worth noting that the farm that they live on is very, very isolated. So that in turn isolates the son from everything. His main friend is his father in the novel for sure and in the film. But the isolation of the farm is very pertinent to the story.
So these are our two families and their setup. As I say, the Chambers have a huge dog called Cujo. And because they have such a big land, Cujo's never tied up. He can sort of go, not around the valley, but you get the sense that it's farm after farm after farm, and he can go quite far. Then the neighbors sort of know and recognize him. And one day he's just out in the field and he chases a rabbit down into like a small cavern hole where he gets stuck.
I loved this bit in the book. This bit for me was brilliant.
Like the rabbit running around and him sort of barking freaks out the bats in the cave. Because he's blocking the door, they just sort of like flurry around and he gets bitten and he gets rabies. But we know this in the text. It says like, and he's bitten by a rabid bat. Like there's no question of it. We get these micro looks into Cujo's head, which is
what I love. I love this.
He will refer to the family as like the Trinity.
Yeah.
The man, the woman, the boy.
Yeah.
They're pretty brief. Yeah. But when they come in, especially the next time I'll bring it up. And so the first half of this book is just back and forth in these two families. Cujo actually has very little to play at this point. We get this chapter where he gets bitten, but it's not like he's in every scene. It's not particularly that's as far as Cujo's concerned, foreboding. But this is where I was talking about the beginning with this like magic in the air, because the kid refers to this monster with like demon eyes.
Yeah.
One point when the wife is like super sleepy and dealing with it, she looks into the cupboard and sort of has a glimpse of a monster. And so the time is getting closer for the family, both families, to be sort of split up momentarily. The Vic is flying off to a different city. Donna like assured him that it's over, and they've spoken frankly about it. It was 5 times, and because of this, and she kind of fears becoming old and I guess stale.
Despite the fact that his wife's had an affair, he can't stay to try and fix the relationship because the account that was 90% of the money they make is in jeopardy of folding, basically. So he has to leave.
But so the setups are pretty tight with both families.
Mm-hmm.
With these Trentons, has to go at kind of the worst time ever. The other family, Brett, the mechanic's son, wakes up early on the morning that he's going to get on a bus and go visit his auntie. And he's sort of out on the porch eating, and he sees Cujo, and Cujo starts growling at him, which he's never done before. And he sort of starts coming for the boy. And just in the last moment,
Cujo, what's up, boy? What's up? Cujo.
Cujo, this is another time, probably I think the last time maybe, where we go into Cujo's head. Right. Cujo is sort of fighting with himself, saying...
Yeah, he's almost got like this bipolar...
right. The running thing with Cujo is he blames whoever he's come across for everything. Like he's in pain, light hurts, he's thirsty, but he can't drink, and he sort of...
noises, the loud noises.
That kid's fault. If I could just kill that kid, I'd feel better. But at the last sort of moment, he has this sort of old Cujo memory about like he would die for the boy. Life.
It hurts so much, Scott. It hurts so much. You have no idea what I felt like reading that section. It was horrible because it's so well written. It's one of those moments where you're just in a Stephen King book, and I know I mentioned this in one of the other parts. There's no other novelist that I've read that makes me stop breathing while I'm reading. And this is one of those sections where I stopped breathing until that ended. And then I was just like, whoa, unbelievable. And the way that you could like all the hairs on my arms are standing up at the moment from just the memory of that sequence. Flipping heck.
Because it's like less than a page, probably, this scene.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not including, I guess, the build-up of the kid getting the cereal.
Thankfully, it is only a page because I would have died of not breathing if it had been any longer.
But so, yeah, Cujo just comes to his senses, as it were, fights off the rabies.
And then legs it,
Just does a 180 on bolts to get away from the kid. The reason why the setup is so tight and is so beautifully plays into this is the kid tries to tell his mum something's not right with Cujo. That in the fear that her getaway is so precarious, the husband could easily say, if he's sick, you need to stay to look after him. He's your dog, to the kid.
Yeah.
And so she, on her defense, I don't think she thinks it's rabies. But
none of them have seen Cujo at this point at all in any shape or form, or how he's, once we're where we need to go, we'll give him a ring and say, are you feeding Cujo? That's how we're sure that Cujo's okay.
Because unbeknownst to us, that the husband is planning to get away himself.
Yes.
So as soon as they're gone, he's going to come back, shut up shop, and not Vegas, but hit the next big city with his buddy and his neighbor, and just kind of booze and sleep around and just. Yeah. And so they're at the bus stop, and we just get this one single line of after getting on the bus and saying goodbye to his father, he would never see his dad alive again. And it's just that premonition of, okay, so we know he's going to die. And there's nothing wrong with that. But this sort of thing happens in Pet Sematary, and it is heartbreaking. And it happens here, and it's just, I don't know. It just feels like there are ways to use that kind of line. Yeah. Like telling us someone is going to die in a suspense book where we know people are going to die. And I guess it's kind of obvious, really. It's Stephen King. We know there's a rabid dog. This guy's going back to his farm.
He's the evil person, so we know he's going to get killed.
Right. And so I want to stop at this point and say, like, this book is really well written on this drama side. This feels like a great example of write the drama, then the horror.
Yes, exactly. What we were talking about it earlier on. It's very much, you can see where Dolores Claiborne came from. Ability to write drama as well tight as he does here in Cujo, which is very early on in his career. He then goes back to it and does something similar with Dolores Claiborne, which is all about family and abuse and the repercussions of abuse and living under a control and a belt buckle.
Don't get me wrong, of course, horror and the supernatural is this thing, but sometimes I feel like I would she tried to just write a straight drama. Without Cujo, I would still read and enjoy this book.
Yes.
Playing out as a straight drama or a tragedy, I would flat out read.
Again, it's got just what I loved about this setup was you knew what this book was about, and it wasn't about this dramas. It wasn't about all this. It was just about this second half rabid dog. Then that just looms very faintly, but looms in the background the whole time. So you've got this tightly written setup that runs for almost like a third or more of the book, and then the horror part of it. And well, we'll see what you thought of that in a minute.
So Donna is out, and then it finally just breaks down, and she, again, it's not as simple as she just goes to the mechanics. There's this just nice interweaving of, I guess, a set of events that leads to the setup as we know. Like, she doesn't want to take the kid to the mechanics. It's sort of late in the day. The kid is cranky. She just wants to get it done because she might have to walk back if the car can't get fixed. The babysitter won't answer, and the kid is very scared of his dad not being there at the moment. The kid's dad is the only one who can really do the mantra to scare away the monsters.
Why is my son gravitating more towards the father and not to me? What is it? There's a disconnect. She doesn't want to exacerbate that any more further than what it already is, because she does love her son.
I do feel like that potentially, although it's not mentioned, plays into the idea that she is very scared of becoming nothing. Like, she's scared of just being a small suburban mum. Like, she's just walking down the street and she just sees a woman who's a bit shabbily dressed with kids, and she can borderline have an anxiety attack that like the next 10 years could flash by and she'll still be exactly where she is. I'm not sure why, but she does write a note on the wall saying, "Gone to the mechanics." Because I guess at some point the babysitter is coming. She's considering leaving the kid home alone for half hour, but she takes the kid. It's just like, okay, let's just get it done. If we have to walk back, the kid's just sort of like, I'll walk, I won't get tired. And across town, Cujo begins Cujoing. He comes across a neighbor, and this is the
same neighbor, the father of the couple that have gone away.
Yeah, the guy knows Cujo very well, and he feels its aggression. And I think he knows, he's like, well, that's rabies. But he just can't fight him off. He sort of tries to sort of back away, tries to get it done. At one point, he's in the house and Cujo is outside. So he's feeling relieved, like he sort of had to fight him off a bit.
Got into the house, shut the first door, the one with the mesh and everything that you see. And Cujo's sort of out on the porch, just pacing and growling and dripping.
I guess for me, I get a very Steinbeckian view of their houses. I don't know why they're not shacks, but they could. The way this guy feels to me, even though it's not explicitly said, it feels quite run down. Like, hanging on hinges, broken windows, just plastered over. But so as a result, anyway, Cujo has no problem just breaking into the house and just mauling this guy to death, like you said. The dad, the mechanic, sort of like going around. I think the next day, the time frame can be a bit slippy in the book. From Cujo getting bitten to the morning that the family leaves, I think they say it's been 7 days. But there's no, like, apart from that line, you don't get that sense. Like, everything feels like it's moving quick. It's safe to say that the mechanic comes around to see his friend and just sees the blood everywhere.
He gets in and basically he sees his mate dead in the hallway and just starts to, obviously panic and goes to phone the police, and he's wandering around the house and he hears a bang in one of the rooms. Cujo stalks into the kitchen and he's like, Cujo.
And
is it well written in the book? The actual savagery of it? Because in the film it's very good. It's really well done.
It's gory, but I will say my least favorite thing about King is his action.
Right, okay.
When it comes to physical action, like the punch came from the left side and stuff. I'm reading fast to figure out how it ended, like to get to the beat of who won. But he is bloody. He will sort of like stop on a ripped tendon and talk about the flowing blood and stuff. And I think he's very on point with talking about the warmth of blood a lot.
Yeah.
Donna rocks up to the mechanic, just thinking either he can fix it now or he can fix it later, and I walk back. Either way, the car's just kaputski, and she sort of needs the car while the husband is away.
Yeah, and she arrives and literally the car conks out in the driveway, doesn't it? Completely, just goes.
Yeah, like it just sort of, once she kills that engine, it has a kick, and then it's not going to start again. She sort of gets out and sort of looks around, and no one's there, and then just from the barn, like within this mechanic's house, Cujo sort of lives in the barn.
Yeah.
And they sort of always refer to like Cujo's in the barn. She can see him coming. It's just she's met him before, and she remembers thinking, "Oh, he's scary, but he's actually friendly." Like just like he's got covered in blood. He's growling. He's frothing. Kid, get in the car. She just figures out it in time, and Cujo is at the door, and he is just hammering at the door. It's a car door, so it's sturdy, but it still puts some dents in it. So many times throughout the book, she's convinced he's knocked himself out.
Yeah,
he slammed into the car that hard. Finally, I would say we're about halfway, just over halfway of the page count of the book. We're in place. It's a hot day. It is summer. They have a little bit of food, like a snack, and a very small amount of water. And they are trapped in the car, and Cujo will not let up. This again, we go into Cujo's head, and he just blames this woman for everything that's ever gone wrong. He just can't help it. He's fully rebel now. The massive chunk of this book regarding Cujo is Cujo sort of retreating to the barn. She'll get out the car. She'll kind of creep, but Cujo will just stick his head up, and she has to get back in.
Yeah.
She's not that far from the house.
No.
She says if she didn't have the kid, she'd go for it. But the biggest fear is dying and leaving the kid on his own. And she doesn't know if the door's open or locked. She doesn't know if Cujo has like a back door that's open. So there's a lot of unknown variables.
The only known variable is that he's a 200-pound Saint Bernard.
Like her memory keeps bleeping, like the mailbox. Remember the mailbox? And she keeps throwing it out because there's more important things to do. And I thought it was going to be a bit more fun and sophisticated than it was. But she sort of flags like the flag was up on the mailbox. And in the States, for our UK non-American citizens, like you can have your mail picked up from your own mailbox. You just have a little flag that you put up, and it's a sign for the mailman that there's something for him to pick up.
Yeah.
So she thinks if that's picked up, which it is, the mailman will come tomorrow morning at early AM, and we'll just sort of honk the horn and we'll be saved.
Yeah.
Him being a mechanic, I thought there was like, hey, there's a parcel. I just need to get that parcel, and like, oh, there's not a chainsaw, but something she would use. And so all this time we're cutting back to the two families still. And Vic, he's having premonitions. So I think he calls as soon as he lands, which wasn't the plan. He was supposed to call when he settled into his hotel. But I think the effect of that means he won't call later. And then the next day is a business day. So because he called sooner rather than later, the fact that she's missing goes unnoticed.
Yes, for an elongated amount of time, definitely.
So him and his business partner sort of talk about, I don't know, the nature of advertising, where their business is going, what their goals are, whether they should just pack it all in.
Yeah.
It kind of pulls you out of everything. It's not even that I don't like these characters. It's just they talk about advertising a lot.
Yeah.
That night, the dad has a dream. I think he compares it to a scene from like King Kong, where all the explorers are on a log crossing a cavern, and King Kong is shaking it. But there's one guy who sort of crawls into the tree, and the monster, he can't get in there, so he's just shaking it. But he's picturing, that's what he compares it to, but the monster itself is obscure, as dreams are. And inside the tree is his wife and his kid. I didn't really dig this much.
No.
I just thought the kid has his whole bad dream thing. The wife even had a flash of the monster, and in one of the sort of violent fights with Cujo, it flashes up like it's the monster. That's what you saw in the cupboard that time. And again, her mind is very good at just like, stop talking nonsense, get your head in the game. There's still this like, this is what you feared.
Yeah.
And now we have the dad having his dream. We follow the mechanic's wife and the son, and we just sort of carry on with this drama. She can feel the dad's influence about the kid judging her sister, but he's still but he's still concerned about Cujo.
She rings the house quite frequently, doesn't she?
Yeah, because Donna can sort of hear it from the car. But that night, the kid, Brett, the mechanic's son, starts like sleepwalking. So she watches him and she figures out what he's doing is like feeding Cujo.
Right. So
And this woo Cujo. And again, this is one of my not flaws, but something I was like, there's too much of this. Is like another character is having like a guided premonition that something's wrong. And it's like, so we've got 4 characters now in some way or another, and some are stronger than others, but we don't, it's not that long a book. Nothing comes to it. They worry, but there's no eureka moment that will have to play on them. Also, in the meantime, Steve Kemp, the spurned lover, decides that
to extract his revenge.
Yeah, the note wasn't enough. So he goes around the house, finds the door unlocked, finds the whole thing empty, and just smashes the house up. And I guess the key thing is he wipes off the board, gone to the mechanics, and just puts like a vengeful, like, how do you like me now, or something like that. Yeah. He just skips town, or goes to skip town. This is on par with the film?
Yep, pretty much exactly the same.
I feel like the way I'm describing it isn't being that riveting, but actually in sections of the book it's not. Like these cutaways, it's not that I don't really like them, but it's not about the sort of adrenaline fueling. I guess it's about the like obliviousness.
Yeah, no, it reflects what would be happening on the farm, doesn't it? It fills in the gaps, because if it was just about what happens on the farm, you pretty much could wrap it up in a couple of pages.
But I'm not gonna lie, that's what I thought the book was. I thought the majority of this book would stick once the action kicked off, at least. I don't know if we actually could cut just the pages in the car and on the farm out, like you say, it would be shorter.
Because the amount of time that they spend trapped in the car is quite a substantial amount. You need to reflect that passing of time, and I think this is probably the best way that he could have done it.
But he would go on to work this scenario type again, and I would say stick the landing. And not to say he doesn't stick the landing here, but because, like I said, everyone I know has heard of Cujo, but no one's read it. I imagine a lot of people would have my thoughts. So like, we don't spend that much time in the car with Donna and Cujo outside. But I would say like Gerald's Game, he comes up with a scenario to keep someone in a small, tight space.
Yeah.
And outside of flashbacks, he keeps them in there for like a fair amount. I know your thoughts on Gerald's Game loosely, but I guess we speed it up a little. Vic's business partner just says, "You're that worried." Obviously, Vic is thinking like, has she left me after all? Has she run off? But she wouldn't.
Every time he rings, he can't get in contact with her.
So he calls like a local sheriff to just check the house. You have my permission to go in if no one answers. I just need some peace of mind. And
this is different to the film here. In the film, he gets to a point where he just can't stand being away and not knowing what's going on. And the paranoia gets to him. So he's like, look, I'm going to leave this with you. I don't care. I have to go. Jumps in his car and just gets on a plane and flies back.
The police finding the house trashed and sort of relaying what's happened. And that he hires a car to drive all night to get home. And we sort of have another strand sort of following the police. And when he finally arrives home, we get this very Columbo style detective thing. It feels very like just one more thing that doesn't sit right with me. The detective is just stuck on where is the car.
Yes.
So I guess the husband's car is at the airport. Every scenario they come up with for this detective, it's like, yep, sure. But one thing doesn't sit right. Where would the car be? If the guy, so he comes clean and says, my wife had an affair. He sent this note. It had to have been him. It's like, okay, but if he planned it, there would be a van. The car would be here. If it was XYZ, we'd know where the car was. It just keeps coming back to the car. And
so good.
The good and bad about Steve Kemp is that by smashing up the house, he alerted that there was an issue.
Yeah.
So without that, the policeman would have, the sheriff would have come in and said, I mean, they're not here, but don't panic because nothing's smashed. On the bad side is he's now stolen the limelight. It's like a sort of like...
Yeah, all the attention is on him.
Right. And he's eventually caught and he's brought in for questioning. But it's sort of clear he smashed the house, but has no idea where they are. But so one small sheriff is like, well, you check out the car because the husband said car issues, but it's not a big lead. Donna and Tad are on their last tether. It is like the hottest day it's been in like 4 years, sort of thing.
Yeah, so basically in the film, and I'm pretty sure it's just the same in the book, the copper turns up and gets out of the car and wanders towards the house, and the mother and the kid are in the car and they're basically unconscious because of the heat. They're like, bleh. He then hears something going on in the barn. Cujo stalks in the door, and he sees that this is all happening, goes to get his gun. Cujo jumps him, he falls backwards, drops the gun, and then climbs up the hydraulic machine that they'd bought and along the banisters, and Cujo's just barking and jumping and barking and jumping. And that wakes the woman up, and she sort of rises and sees Cujo jump, and the man loses balance, fall, gets savaged, has his throat ripped out, his chest ripped out, and she sees all of that happening. So yeah.
The kid is pretty sick at this point. I think the plan is to go for the cop car.
Yes, it's either go for the cop car or go for the house. It's one of the two. In the film, she goes for the house, I believe, because the kid is basically, you pick him up and he's limp. He's just...
Right. He's in and out.
He's not got long left, and she needs to do something, and she needs to do it now.
And I think the gun points, like, if she'd have known about the gun, she would have gone for it. But
she sees a bat early on.
Yeah, I guess at the beginning it seems ludicrous because the dog is so big, but now it's her only option.
Oh, that bit, the bit where why she's bitten. When you were saying that he hides behind the car, it's in the film, it's that sequence. So she gets out of the car and she looks about and she can't see him, and he comes around and jumps her as she's trying to get back in. And there's a whole sequence where Cujo's in the car on her chest, biting, and she's kicking, and he's biting and she's kicking, and smacks his head with something. There's like, she's got a metal water flask that had the little bit of water that they hadn't, and she beats Cujo around the head with that, and that's enough for her to push him out and then slam the door shut again.
So just time is running out. No one's coming to save you. The kid is dying. She just goes for the bat, and the two duke it out, and she gets some pretty good hits in. I'm guessing the bat's sort of old. She basically snaps the bat.
Yeah, on Cujo's head.
And as Cujo's fighting, she can use the sharp shards of the broken bat to stab him.
So he lunges at her, and as he lunges and she falls back and he lands on top of her, the shard goes into his chest.
Right. Like, impales himself. And at this time, Vic rocks up. I think it's like, we've got the guy, we've seen his van, we've got the Steve.
That's it. It's like the copper went to the bar, and he's like, well, what have you heard back from the copper? And he's like, well, no, we haven't heard anything yet.
But they just sort of smirk him. It's like, God, that cop's incompetent.
Yeah.
But Vic's the only one like,
no, this isn't right.
I'm going to check it out. And he literally pulls up to see his wife battering Cujo.
Yeah.
And he sort of gets out to help, but she's in a frenzy. And this is where we get our dark spin, as it were. He sort of gets out and he's like, what's going on? And sort of takes the bat and just tries to get some sense out of her. And she's sort of like, I did it. We had to save him. So he's like, oh my God, the kid. So, while she's sort of like catching her breath and sort of just, throwing up, as it were, outside on the lawn, he comes out and he's like, how long has he been gone? How long has Ted been dead? And that's when we realized that like the kid doesn't make it.
Yeah.
Which is that's the biggest shock, I suppose, from this book. I was not expecting that.
Were you not?
No. I mean, come on, man. Did you see that coming? I don't think many people would have.
No, I didn't see it coming either. No, it's harrowing. In the film, he makes it.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that they cheered up the ending. So just by that one sentence, I was like, well, obviously the kid doesn't. So the family have just left reeling on this lawn. She's very broken because it was all for nothing. I think she'd rather have just died if this was.
Yeah, especially at this point, because her husband is never going to forgive her for anything. She just had an affair. She's just killed their kid, as far as he's concerned.
Oh, okay. In the book, it plays out. It doesn't quite play out like that in the book.
Does it not?
No, like in this instant, like she stays the lead character here. Vic doesn't take over. She sort of pushes Vic away and starts giving him CPR for like a solid hour. Like no one can like every time he tries to stop her, she would just like hit him away. Even when the paramedics come, she bites one of the paramedics. She's just so intent. She has to save him. And then we get our afterward, I guess. Like she spent a long time in hospital. Like no one else died of the rabies. Like it was a horrible treatment, but she survived. The paramedic who got bitten didn't get rabies. I guess the only one with the sort of happy ending is Charity, who just sort of like, she's not glad that the boy's dad is dead, but she's sort of happy she can get the life she always wanted. Because throughout it, she's talking about leaving him and divorcing, but she always knows she just won't or she can't.
Mm-hmm.
So do we get an afterwards in Cujo? I don't quite remember what happens to the family, but
in the film, she gets the kid into the house, and he's, after stabbing Cujo goes limp and lame and just is dead, basically. She gets the kid out of the car, gets him in the house, he's not breathing, and she starts giving him CPR. She CPR, water, splash down his throat, CPR. And he comes back to life, just as Cujo then comes in through the door again, and she takes the copper's gun, shoots Cujo. As Vic is turning up in the car, Cujo dies. Vic comes running into the house, and she's just stood there holding their kid, covered in blood. He's alive and gasping, but he's alive, and that is basically where it ends in the film.
Did a horror fake out?
Yeah, you get the fake out death.
I think I told that a bit unclimactically, but that is Cujo.
Yeah, that is Cujo. What did you think?
It was a very quick read for me. There's this collection of King now, and they are basically the cheapest paperbacks you can get, and I've got a lot of his on that. But the plus side is that the margins are wide and the lettering is big, so no matter the size of the book, when it's this style, you just sort of race through it. Like you like if you read for half hour, you physically feel like how far you're getting in on this book. So I read this book about 2 days, 3 days in the heat of summer here in Montreal. Some of it.
Nice.
There's stuff I absolutely loved about it. I don't think there's anything I hated about it, but there's stuff that was a bit eye-rolling, I suppose, and not unnecessary. But I think, like I said, all the characters having some type of premonition, it didn't feel.
It's very early King as well. That's something. Some things that I forget when reading some of his earlier stuff. Is you're like, oh yeah, well, I've seen this, or I've heard this, or I've read this. But then you think, well, when this came out, I wouldn't have done. This would have been the first time that this would have been tapped into, or he would just be establishing this universe that I've become accustomed to now, having been in it for the better part of 60 years or whatever it is now.
Like I would certainly say, like broad stroke themes, I can see him coming back to, like I was saying, Gerald's Game. Like being trapped, physically trapped in with your fear, and in this case, it's like a physical fear. Gerald's Game, it's the borderline of is it physical or is it mental aberrations and stuff. Certainly that like closed-in space. The family definitely reminded me of the family from Pet Sematary, and I think it's just so well written, I suppose. Like everyone just kind of feels real. Everyone is kind of flawed. Everyone is trying to do their best, whether they're failing or not.
The father in Pet Sematary is a wimp, isn't he? And the father in this isn't a wimp, but he's not the affair guy. He's not the stud, the strength, the pillar of boosh. Very much a shirt and tie type.
He really takes a step back in the book when he leaves. I'm not too much a fan of following him in the way we did when he was out there. I guess we had to, but I guess it's sort of semi ramping up the pace and then pulling us back again.
Going to that, like you said that you really liked the drama at the beginning, the first half of the book, the two.
Yeah, just it's like a vignette.
So why did that not pay off in the second half for you? Because it became a drag.
Well, I guess they don't initiate anything new. Like nothing is gaining from it, and the action has kicked off at this stage. It feels like a lot of it just centered around the advertising.
Yes.
at least for Vic's character, it stopped being dramatic. It was about him per se. And I guess when you know events are interrupted, that they're going to stop meaning so much.
Yeah, I guess when the action's happening here and you're being told to look over there, you're like, well, but what? But hang on.
I've got to be honest. I wasn't that riveted by the action itself. I wasn't, like I said, I didn't hate the action, but I wasn't blown away, and I was glad it was quite short. I definitely thought it was going to be smart within the car, but it wasn't very brute force and hide. Like I thought there would be not an elaborate plan, but some sort of plan to, I don't know, trick the dog into the boot and cut them in the boot, or, you know, like I said, I thought they kept flagging the post box for a while. I thought there was going to be a package she was going to run and get, and the package was going to be like a tool she could use to.
In the film with the post box, they go to the post office and you see the postman collecting all the post, and he picks up stuff for farm to deliver there. It's like a bumper in wrapping, and as he's walking out the door, the guy at the counter is like, "Oh yeah, don't you remember you've got this thing here says that, you know, they're away, don't bother posting anything." So he goes, thanks, you saved me a journey, puts it back down, and that's the last you see of it. So she's waiting for this postman to turn up, and you know fully well that he's never going to turn up.
I mean, he certainly tries his best, I guess, and succeeds, to play into the idea of like the little events that led everything to take place. Like arguably any one of these could have averted at least the death of the kid, because I was reading back trying to find out when we find out Tad has died, it certainly feels like it happened since she got out of the car and has been fighting Cujo. And that's not to suggest that there's any link with the kid and Cujo, but I was reading back to see if it's like, has the kid died ages ago? And I'm reading back to see if there was anything I missed that's like, no, the kid died like hours ago, and these conversations were hallucinogenic aberrations, which actually isn't the case as far as I could find. Did the kid need to die? I'm not convinced he did. I'm convinced it was a bit of shock value.
I think it worked better for it. I think it was a better ending for him dying. Because I remember just being like, what the fuck? Because you're so used to everything being for some reason, for something in that type of novel. For it not to work out that way was quite refreshing at the time.
But I guess because it just came suddenly, so close at the end, without any avail.
Well, it didn't. I wouldn't say it came suddenly. I disagree with that, because it gets weaker and weaker. So it's a slow drip with a very abrupt ending. But I could imagine that's what it would be like in that situation if you're dying of heat and dehydration. You're reading a horror book for a reason, aren't you? And if the kid had survived, you're like, yay, good prevails. Do you think it ties back into the beginning part you mentioned, that little, there's horrors and there's, you know?
Well, I mean, I'm guessing it's playing into like the fear of fear, and then there's just things out of your control. Like I'm reading a few reviews, like he wrote this in the throes of his alcoholism.
Yes.
I sort of remember it a bit in on writing. He doesn't remember writing this.
Yep.
So a lot of people say like Cujo is kind of a metaphor like for addiction. But knowing he wrote it in the midst of it, like it, not that it's forced on, but I'm not convinced necessarily 100% that was his intention. And I could totally get the metaphor of, you know, like this big cuddly dog that could sort of flip on you, the bursting of anger, as it were. I guess when I was reading it, I thought it was more of a metaphor for the damage that can be done to a marriage. You know what I mean? Like having an affair is like the shock on a marriage equivalent of chucking a rabid Saint Bernard into your living room when you're sitting there eating your tea or something.
The cat amongst the pigeons.
But I don't know. There's a lot of reviews, a lot of feedback that Cujo is an addiction metaphor, which I mean, it's there, fair enough. But like I said, I'm just not convinced he wrote that 100%.
No, I don't think that would. I wouldn't say that was the case. I've not seen any interviews where he said that's the case. I've seen, like you said, on writing, he mentions the fact that he doesn't remember writing it. Which, could you imagine that? Being a writer, writing an entire novel and then going, what the hell, where did this come from?
I mean, it wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't. It's pretty good and it sold really well. If it's like, oh, this is a wake up call, but
that came in the guise of Tommy Knockers, the wake up call.
Oh, okay, right. But yeah, the fact that he could black out and have a book, I guess he does play with that in The Dark Half and other things, but there's a horror story right there, I guess.
For me, going back to what you said in the beginning, the trailer and the film looked pretty naff, and I did the big eye bulge. How did you read my eye bulge?
That you really liked it?
Yes, it's a great, really good adaptation of the film, of the book. It's genuinely well acted. It's very tense. It tweaks what it needs to tweak well. I don't agree necessarily that kids should have survived, but if you've read the book, it does change it, and and the way that they do it is quite good. It's nice that the family together, and it does have that happy ending, which you come to expect from films more than necessarily books, possibly. The film is very enjoyable, and I highly recommend you watch it. It's not cheesy, it's not campy, it's acted very well, it's very serious. The guy that she has the affair with, he's recognisable, but nobody else. And the Columbo-like guy, you recognise him as well, but they're not big names. You've just seen them a lot in bit parts and things like that. Yeah, both I thought were really, really good.
How much of the runtime stays in the car? I would feel like within a film you can stay in the car more than the book did.
Mm-hmm. I'd say it's about the same. The first half of the book, the film, it's an hour and a half, an hour and 45, I think. And the first half of it is all about the dynamic of the families, less about the abusive side of things. It's there, and you know it's happening, but it's not as well fleshed out.
Does it stick with the Chambers once they leave, like the mum and the son?
No. When they go away, you have a brief flash to the kid riding around in the courtyard on a bike, and that's, I think, roughly about it. You see him happy. Never see the wife again.
I guess part answer to your question of when you were saying, like, why does the drama work so well in the first half, but once Cujo kicks off and we're still following those family dramas, the almost opportunity either of them has to flag there's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it comes a little tiresome, especially with the kid, like bugging his mum to check on Cujo.
Like, yeah, I think that's literally the only reason that exists in the second half, especially the abusive side of the story, is that she's ringing back, and that constant ringing is constantly pissing off Cujo, who then sees them in the car and takes it out on them, because the phone is just shrilling in the background, sort of every 4 or 5 hours, just ring, 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 incessantly, and that is a sort of crank for Cujo's anger.
She, the wife of the mechanic, she is working to sort out Cujo because the kid won't let it drop, and she doesn't want to have the whole trip. So, like, once the husband doesn't pick up, she is calling like the next house, and she is trying to figure something out.
Yeah, that doesn't come across in the.
Yes, it's building a suspense of like, will she be the first to flag it and raise help? But it just comes off, I guess, it's a bit dull, actually.
Yeah, like, no, that's fair enough.
That strand so far away.
Yeah, I suppose it's exactly that. It's people in peril, and then people externally brushing past or just not doing the right thing. You're kind of constantly like one step away from being in the place you need to be to solve the problem. And there's a lot of that going on, isn't there? The almosts, the maybes.
Because this book is going to echo in all the rest of the Castle Rock ones. I don't think I've ever read one where there wasn't, remember the time that St. Bernard, that dog went crazy and killed people. Yeah.
It's in the Castle Rock TV series, though, they mention it.
Well, yeah, I guess I might say. But have you been watching Castle Rock? I haven't seen any of it.
Yeah, I saw the first season. Really good.
It seems really hard to comprehend how it's going to play out.
No, it was very good. It wasn't what I expected it to be, and it's not a Stephen King hits sort of thing.
Right,
It's just
okay.
like it's a story. It's its own story in Castle Rock with nods to things that happens in the books. So they mention the Saint Bernard.
Is it good? Is it? It sounds a bit laborious.
No, the first season was really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I haven't seen the second season, and that I think focuses more on Annie Wilkes. She's in it from Misery,
Okay.
and she is predominantly the main character, I think, and it's about her and how she becomes who she becomes later on.
Is she quite young in it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
I do want to see the second season, but they're not renewed it for a third. So.
Oh, okay. It's a shame. Is it J.J. Abrahams?
Hmm?
Is it Abrahams?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a bit too. Not. I don't know what the word is. It's like, I want to say clever, but it's not necessarily clever. It's just very deep and too deep.
People wanted the greatest hits. People wanted a rabid Saint Bernard fighting a demonic alien clown.
In an asylum. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was sold like that, but it just didn't tap into that enough, and it did its own stories, which is why they switched it up and brought Annie in the second season, I think, and made it more about her. Yeah, it's interesting. I enjoyed the first season. The guy who plays Pennywise is the main character in the first season.
What's say again?
The guy who plays Pennywise in the new films, Bill Skarsgård, is in the first Castle Rock season, is the main character.
As Pennywise?
No. Completely unrelated.
He's playing a different character.
The boy he plays. It's all about the boy. Where did the boy come from? Who is the boy?
Oh, okay. Yeah. But just to wrap up with Cujo, like a good read. Certainly had more depth than I expected it to. Like, it almost delivered where I didn't expect it to, and misdelivered where I did expect it to. Like I said, I don't feel like the action particularly spikes out, although it's gory and stuff at times. Like I said, there's no smart plan. It's just a lot of hiding in the car and Cujo batting his own head.
I think it's good for that, because it's a realistic scenario and it plays out realistically. Clever in that. It's small scale, basically.
What would you say Cujo represents to you? You're not a fan of these questions, are you? You just sound like he's a dog. He's a dog with rabies.
Yeah, he's a dog with rabies. He's everything I ever wanted a child, but bad. I don't prescribe necessarily to this idea that everything's a metaphor, everything has deeper meaning. Sometimes I think it's just a story. And a very
you don't think it ties in to the fact that all the characters were having a premonition, including fear, especially the kid, especially the stuff about, like, you can wish away the monster. Like,
I think that's there so that to sell the idea that there are monsters in the real world, and that you can't wish away them. Despite what your parents tell you, there is abuse. You'll find yourself in relationships where your husband is a monster, where your wife is a monster, where your dog is a monster. And the idea that monsters aren't real is a fallacy.
So you could say Cujo does represent something.
A monster, yeah. It's been bitten. A smaller monster. Yeah. Disease is a monster.
I think you're going very literal with the events now, but yeah. So
I find it difficult to, like, you can argue that maybe an idea is born out of a metaphor, but it doesn't have to be a metaphor for that. It can just be a monster story. No,
for sure. But I think we had it before with the sun dog, where you were convinced it was just a dog coming out of just your everyday dog coming out of your camera. But I don't know. But I think in writing he says, don't force a metaphor, but if one surfaces, run with it. And I guess with so many of his works, it does feel like there's something below that. That's just the way it's written. Do you know what I mean? Like with these premonitions, with the mantra, with the affair. Do you know what I mean? It feels like it's like I was saying. I thought it was like a sort of metaphor for a bombshell in a marriage. Like you said, the cat just chucking a cat in amongst some pigeons.
Yeah,
that's how it feels, right? When people say it's like a sledgehammer to the chest emotionally, right? He's just sort of like, well, let's take that literal and feed it in.
Yeah, completely. I mean, what I did like about Cujo was the same thing I really liked about Perfect Storm.
Oh God. Hey, we're going to wrap it up around there. I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Join us again next episode, and until then, support your local bookstores and have a great day.